Good morning.
Good morning.
Today I want to talk about the first ox herding picture. Sorry about my voice. I've got allergies or something's going on. Anyway, I can talk, so that works. So a Chinese Rinzai master who lived in the Song dynasty around 1150. They don't know exactly when he was alive. Guoan Shiyuan, or Kakuan Shien in Japanese. He was a Rinzai master. He lived and taught, as I said, around 1150. So, he wasn't the first person to come up. He came up with the pictures and the verses that we use for the ox herding pictures. And originally ox herding pictures were 8 pictures, not 10. And he added the last 2. And he added them because he felt like the ox herding pictures needed to reflect the Bodhisattva path, which they do. And as we go through them, we can talk about that. The last one is re-entering the marketplace with helping hands, which is the culmination of the Bodhisattva path. So, but the ox herding pictures themselves are much older than that. And one of the sources I read thought that they were Taoist to begin with. So as I mentioned in the first talk, they're kind of like a Rorschach test. It's like you can overlay in some ways almost anything you want to. Jaco and I went to the Academy of Religion, I may have mentioned this last time, conference, and there were Catholic priests talking about how the ox herding picture was used to discuss the path of exploring Catholicism. So it really has this global reach. So the first picture, as you may recall, is about the practitioner kind of literally beating their way through the bushes and our field. And the verse that goes with this that Kakuan wrote is, "Beating about the endless wild grass, you seek and search. The rivers broaden, the mountains stretch on, and the trails go ever deeper. Your strength exhausted and spirit wearied. No place allows you refuge." Pretty grim, huh? "The only sound, evening cicadas shrill in the maple." Now, this last line of the verse, there's another translation which I like more, and we'll talk about more. So that in this other translation, it is, instead of "the only sound, evening cicadas shrill in the maples," the translation is, "Yet hear that lonely autumn song of a cicada in a maple tree." So it has a kind of much different connotation. But going back to the first line here, "Beating about the endless wild grass, you seek and search." So this is, when we first start out, I think we do this our whole lives actually, but when we don't, if we're talking specifically about Buddhism, we haven't yet discovered Buddhist practice. We haven't yet got an idea about what that might be, or maybe we have an idea about what it is, but certainly not formed. But we're seeking something. We know that we're seeking something. And I can remember in my, I think we do this as kids, as little kids, we're looking for things, we're saying, why? As we get older, we start reading or whatever. In my 20s, I read books about Egyptian mysticism. I read Edgar Cayce. I read, you name it, The Secrets of the Great Pyramids, Wicca. I mean, all these different ways of trying to figure out like what, how to interpret the nature of my experience. So from a Buddhist perspective, we're still beating around. We haven't found the path. We're in the bushes and we're confused. And we're trying to kind of grapple with societal norms. I'm thinking about when I was much younger, I was involved in demonstrating against the Vietnam War. Sitting out, I went to the University of Texas, sitting out on the mall for days at a time. It reminds me of what's going on right now. And how passionate I felt about it. I still feel passionate about these things, but I'm not out demonstrating, but I remember what that was like, those feelings. Trying to figure out a way to be relevant in our culture, find a way to really have some impact and to take that passion and put it somewhere that was useful. So this way of, we're just really searching and trying to figure it out. So in the line, it says, beating about the endless wild grass you seek and search. So in Buddhism, we have this metaphor. We talk about the 100 grasses in Zen. So these 100 grasses in Zen is all dharmas, all of the universe, everything that we encounter are these 100 grasses. And all of those 100 grasses are manifesting the Buddha Dharma. All of them are Buddha nature manifest. So here the grasses are wild. Here they're tangled up. So they symbolize this trying to get through this wild tangle of understanding the dharmas, trying to get through this wild tangle of trying to understand our life. And right now we cannot hear the song of the wild grasses. Dogen talks about how these 100 dharmas are a sutra. They're teaching us about life. Everything in our life is teaching us about life, is teaching us about the Buddha Dharma, is teaching us about their Buddha nature and our own, because essentially it's not different. So these wild grasses are speaking, but we cannot hear. We are still thrashing around, trying to figure it out. So we are imagining, when I read these verses, I imagine this big meadow with these grasses that are like, as tall as our head, and we're trying to work our way through it. Or maybe it's a lot of bushes and thickets. And so it hurts. The grasses are kind of like scratching against our face, and we're trying to figure out what's going on. And we're suffering. We're suffering. And that is that suffering that causes us to want to engage. The suffering and questioning that causes us to want to engage in the first place. So this field is vast and wild. And we beat about not knowing exactly what we're seeking. But we keep at it. We're very tenacious. We keep bushwhacking, if you will, through our life in this very tenacious way, trying to figure things out, looking for this end to our suffering. So the ox is a metaphor for the true self. And I have some issues with this as a metaphor, which I will talk about, not today, but as I go through this, how I feel about this. I feel like the ox is more a metaphor for practice, for coming and finding practice. Anyway, we're seeking for reality. In Zen, we see finding things just as they are. The second line is, the rivers broaden, the mountains stretch on, and the trail goes even deeper. The rivers broaden, the mountains stretch on, and the trail goes even deeper. Do you know when you're in a meadow and you're like, I remember going hiking in the Sierras, and it's flat, and then you get to the foothills. So it's like there's this long distance, and then you see the foothills and they're super far away, right? And you drive closer and closer, and then you get in the foothills, and the mountains are really tall. And you're like walking through the mountains, and you're only in the foothills, and there's still the mountain. So this way of says the trails go even deeper. So as we search, we're not finding what we're looking for. In fact, it seems that the obstacles are getting bigger and bigger. As closer we get to the mountain, the bigger it is. And the rivers get wider, and the mountains go on forever. And there are these trails going into the mountains, but we're not sure what to follow. We're not sure which trail to go on. And in the midst of this, we just persist. What was that thing that was, she persists, she persists. So we just keep making this effort. And then the next line is, your strength exhausted and spirits wearied, no place allows you refuge. Wow. It's like, this is tough going, you know? So things are pretty grim here in this first ox herding picture. You're caught in suffering. You can't find the path that leads to an end to suffering. You're getting pretty tired of wading through these weeds, this wild grass, and being confronted with obstacles one after another. And you know something, no matter what book you read, no matter what quote you post on your wall or write in your journal, they work for a little while and then it's a problem. You know, so we're not finding any relief in this first picture. We're not finding equanimity. Okay, so now this last line of the verse. The only sound, evening cicadas shrill in the maples. So one of the commentaries I'm reading about this is by Yamada Roshi, who's a Rinzai teacher. And his interpretation of this is, so he's talking about koan work and things, and he says, you're just driven on to keep practicing because you're so annoyed by the sound of the cicada. So you just want to get out of there. But actually, I don't think that's very helpful. I think it's pretty discouraging. And I think there's a way to look at this last line in which it is much more encouraging. And that's this other translation. You hear that lonely autumn song of a cicada in a maple tree. You hear that lonely autumn song of a cicada in a maple tree. So now this becomes this very evocative line. So despite all the difficulties, imagine that dusk has come. You've been working really hard, bushwhacking your way through all these weeds, and you just sit down. It's autumn, and you're worked, and you're tired, and you just sit down in the autumn dusk, and you hear the sound of the cicada. It's not a grating sound. It's connecting you to your life, to nature, to your true nature, although you don't realize that. You're just exhausted, that's all. You're just sitting down, but you can't make that connection yet. You haven't a context to place those feelings in. So you're resting after this great effort, but you have no way to contextualize the feeling. In the story of the Buddha, in his life story, when he was a teenager, he was attending a ceremony that his father was doing, and he sat down under a tree to watch the ceremony, and he naturally fell, if this is the Zen version of it, he naturally fell into shikantaza. He naturally fell into zazen. He naturally fell into the state of experiencing things just as they were. And this is considered to be the first time, but he didn't really have a context for it. So this is considered to be a pivotal moment in his life that brought about this later seeking that he engaged in. So this is akin to that. We sit down, we have no context for it, we have no language for it, but we instinctively understand that sitting here, listening to the sound of the cicada under the maple tree, that we have this experience. So if this practitioner actually understood what was going on, they could have stopped right then and there. They could have actually experienced their life just as it is, without, forget about the other 9 ox herding pictures. Hopefully they would have gotten up and done number 10. But they didn't have, we have no context for this, you know, but we've had these experiences. Probably all of us as children have had experiences that opened our hearts. All of us as adults have these experiences that we just stop. We just stop and we experience our life just as it is. So he didn't know it, this person didn't know it, but they were listening and abiding in their life. So, but instead, what happens is that we run around exhausting ourselves, looking for things outside our life as affirmation. Something outside our life to tell us about the nature of reality. And the problem is that we don't know what we're looking for. So there's nothing wrong about this first Oxford picture in a way. It's just that this is just the nature of our experience as human beings. This is just what we do. And so here we have a codified in this first picture. So from the perspective of Zen, we are all Buddha nature. We have the capacity to hear that distant sound of things just as they are. The cicada in the maple tree. We have that capacity innately. It is who we are. So there's a Zen dialogue that applies to this. I think the national teacher, Nanyue Huizhang, is a disciple of Huining, the sixth ancestor. And he goes to study with the sixth ancestor. And right as he arrives, the sixth ancestor, one of the things he says to him is he says, what is the Buddha mind? And then Nanyue said, fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles. What is the Buddha mind? Fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles. This is the lonely autumn song of a cicada in the maple tree. This is what is the Buddha mind. Dogen commented about this. He said, we should try studying in detail, where are these fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles? We should ask, what thing is it that appears like this? The old Buddha's mind is the gruel is enough, the rice is enough, the grass is enough, the water is enough. So he says, we should try studying in detail. What does it mean to talk about the sentience, the Buddha nature of fences, walls, tiles, and pebble, of cicadas, of maple trees, of the wild grass? What is this? What is this life that we experience? What are these encounters with all of life talking to us, all of the sentient beings, the fences, walls, tiles, and pebbles? He says we should ask, what thing is it that appears like this? The old Buddha mind. Are the cicadas the old Buddha mind? The grasses are the old Buddha mind? You sitting there under that tree, hearing the cicada, totally caught in suffering. This is the old Buddha mind. The gruel is enough. The rice is enough. Is your life enough to come to this? The gruel is enough. The rice is enough. The grass is enough. The water is enough. Your life is enough, just as it is. So listening to the cicadas is enough. So Dogen mentions, what thing is it that appears like this? When he says, what thing is it that appears like this? He says, we should ask that. What is it that appears like this? So this phrase refers to our essential nature. Again, the sixth ancestor asked Wei Ning. The sixth ancestor, Wei Ning, asked his disciple, Nanyue Huirong, who had just arrived at his monastery and asked for teaching. He says to him, he asked him this question. He said, what is it that appears like this? Who is it that appears like this? What is it that comes like this? And Nanyue couldn't answer that question. He couldn't say what that was. But later he understood the answer to that question. So intellectually we can say what what is it that comes like this? It's not a question. What is it that comes like this? So what is what that comes like this? We can say it's suchness. We can say it's just this. We can say it's our original nature. We can say Buddha comes like this. But we don't understand what that means. Intellectually, we understand what that means, but we don't understand what that means. So even if Nanyue had said, Buddha nature comes like this, the sixth patriarch would have said, go sit. Because Nanyue would not have understood. As Zen students, we know what the answer is, but we don't know what the answer is. We know what the answer is intellectually, but we don't know what the answer is. So Nanyue couldn't answer the question. So he said, I don't understand the question. And then later he understood what the question was. And he went to Wei Ning and he told him. So when this seeker, this person looking for the Dharma, when we are in distress and in exhaustion, and we sit down in the autumn light and we hear the cicadas in the maple tree, this is the sutra of the 100 grasses. It's things just as they are. It is what is it that comes like this? But you know what? In these first ox herding picture, the person can't hear it. They can't hear any of this stuff. They're just exhausted. They're just sitting there. Maybe they're saying, oh, there are burrs on the ground. This is painful. I don't like this. I'd rather be in my bed. I'd rather be at home. I could use a beer right now, you know? So they don't really want to be where they are. So we can't hear the 100 dharmas. We can't see the grasses. So yet, this body, this mind is Buddha. It is not absent. Buddha nature is presencing. We are in the presence of, and actually part of, not different from the 100 grasses, not different from the cicadas, not different from, we are the what that thus comes. We just don't know it. So this is really important in our school. Some schools say, you do this, you don't have this. Some schools say you have to be reborn over and over again to develop the capacity to have Buddha nature. Our school says, no, you come this way. So all of the searching and looking is necessary. It is the nature of being a human being. But it turns on a dime because we are not different from this. We are the what that comes like this. The cicada is the what that comes like this. The maple tree is the what that comes like this. We are not different. That's why we sit zazen. That's one of the tools, if you will. But it's not a tool because it's never discarded. It is just this, sitting, this, being this, the what is it? So Dogen talks about the search and he talks about subsequent training. He wrote tending the ox for 3 years. That's what Nanyue did. He tended the ox for 3 years. After tending the ox for 3 years, he came back to the sixth patriarch and could answer that question. And it was not an intellectual answer to that question. So here in this first picture, we cannot hear the true sound of the Cicada Sutra. And we have to continue our search. We have to teach. We have to tend the ox for 3 years. So he comments on the formation of the practice of Zen Master Wei Shan. He said he worked further for 3 years tending the ox. Dogen said this is a sustained practice that has gone extinct in recent times and is no longer known. Well, I hope that's not true. We're making our best effort here. And then he continues, tending the ox for 3 years, left him no longer seeking sayings from others. So he had found this grounding in practice in himself. He could do this work himself. And so we continue on looking for the ox. This practitioner in the first picture continues on. So next time I'll talk about the second verse. Thank you.